Well, good day to this GreenTech interview, Lisanne and Mike. I'm very glad to see you both here online. We have, of course, to turn into these kind of toolings to communicate with each other in these days of still the COVID times. I'm very glad to see you again. Well, today we are going to talk about. Well, I'm glad you are prepared. It's always
just perfect. Just perfect.
Oh, well, you are so professional. I'm so glad you are.
That was it. That was the professional part.
Yeah, okay. Well, now we are going to have a very nice interview with only fun and in-depth conversations about vertical farming. I'm very glad to have both of you here. Lisanne, may I ask you to introduce yourself short and tell us about your profession in vertical farming?
Yes. Hi there, everyone. First of all, Mariska, thanks so much for inviting me to this conversation. I'm very happy to share with you my point of view on vertical farming. I'm Lisanne Meulendijks. I am currently working at the Delphy Improvement Center as a researcher on vertical farming. And there I focus on creating growth knowledge for vertical farms specifically.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Mike, all the way from USA. Can you tell me about your profession? I know you're a grower, of course. You've always also contributed to our webinar together with Priva and Mijn Prins, of course, and Rob Baan from Corporate Crest. But can you a little bit, tell us a little bit more about yourself and 80 acres?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, Mariska, thank you for having me and 80 acres. We're honored to represent here, and I'm going to try to learn from Lisanne. And my problem usually is brevity, so Lisanne is teaching me how to only say what is important and do so more quickly. So I'm the CEO and the co-founder of 80 Acres. We're an indoor farming company based in Cincinnati, or actually Hamilton, Ohio.
Yeah.
And we have 8 farms in 4 different states in North America. We're selling actually produce in 6 states. We have our own grow zone manufacturing facility. We partnered with Priva on building grow zones. Everybody obviously knows who Priva is. Priva needs no introductions. And also Akata joined us as well in the Infinite Acres joint venture that is owned by Akata, Priva, and 80 Acres, and that's a system provider, and 80 Acres is then the operator of those farms.
I see. Okay. Well, we're 2 big professionals in this interview, and well, we are going to elaborate on how horticulture and vertical farming are related. Next to that, we are going to have a look at what innovations are needed for vertical farming. Well, also we will dive into how a vertical farm differs from a regular greenhouse. And then after that, I'm very curious to know from both of you how you manage through these times of COVID-19, and if some new ideas came out of the crisis. But let's first start with horticulture and the relation of vertical farming together. So you have prepared some slides as well, both of you, and I'm going to start with one slide of you, Mike, about the relation. So let me have this full screen. So can you elaborate a little bit more on this, Mike?
Absolutely. Look, to me, to us at 80 Acres and Infinite Acres, there is no vertical farming without horticulture. Vertical farming has to be crop-centric. It's all about crops, and we created with Infinite Acres this gemstone that defines a properly designed system with operational capability to run a vertical farm. And you can see that right in the center of that is the crop. Every varietal requires different needs, and to have an indoor farm, a vertical farm that is holistic, you have to have all the components, the integrated components It's very interdisciplinary. You have to understand the climate. There's a lot of focus on the lights, and lights are very, very important, as you can see on the far right side. But you also need sensors and controls. A lot about sensor controls. Where do you place them? A lot of the sensors need to continue to be developed. A lot of the machine learning and AI that people kind of drop a lot of buzzwords around, but it is really important in indoor farming because we do grow so much faster. We do have so much data that there's a lot to be said there. But climate is really critical, and I think until very recently has been somewhat misunderstood. And again, that's the whole point of Priva, who is a climate expert and has understood this for years and years. How you move air, whether it's horizontal or vertical or laminar, is critical. How plants transevaporate is critical. How you control humidity and the environment that you create and set up is critical. And obviously that's related to an irrigation system. It's very integrated with proper, what we're calling fertigation, fertilizer and irrigation at the same time, obviously. Critical to understand that. Water systems are the biggest risk to indoor farms because we recirculate everything. Again, tremendous expertise of Priva. And then once you have all that, to make indoor farming, vertical farming work, you have to get to the right unit economics. And labor is a huge component. You can't get there without automation. And you can't get there without operational excellence. So we have a lot of definition of how you build systems and operate them. Then where you take labor out, it's not automation for the sake of automation. It's all about the right, proper automation that makes sense. And by the way, automation in different areas of the world means different things. Automation in Nigeria is very different than automation in Scandinavian countries. And operational excellence. At the end of the day, you got to realize that this farm, the vertical farm, is not only a farm, it's a processing facility, it's a manufacturing center, it's a distribution center. You're compressing all the supply chain elements into this farm, which means that you better understand how to run manufacturing facilities. You better understand food safety. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the innovation pieces. So the point is, it's a very integrated, interdisciplinary approach to that we believe is required to really make indoor farming work. And again, not just to have plants grow. Anybody can grow plants, but to grow plants consistently, to grow plants effectively, to get the right yields, the right quality, and to do it in a really meaningful way, and to do it for more crops than just microgreens and lettuce.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. That's very clear. I'll stop with this sheet, and then I go to you, Lisanne.
Yes.
And you've prepared quite some slides as well. So can you show how you see how horticulture can contribute to a vertical farm?
Yes. So I completely agree with Mike when he's saying there is no vertical farming without horticulture. I'd love to see, Mike, that at your slide, I saw the crop central. And that's also, for me, my central viewpoint in approaching creating growing practices for vertical farming. And how I see the interaction between the horticultural sector and the vertical farming sector is that we have a lot to learn from both. But let's take a step even back. From moving from conventional farming to horticulture, we learn already so many things. But we shouldn't forget that the plant processes that guide, in the end, the growth and hence the yield production are still the same. And so what we learned from that step from open field to horticulture, we should be very much aware, okay, what are the similarities between that horticulture and vertical farming? Because we already learned those things. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on that aspect.
Exactly.
But very important as well to highlight the differences. And there are quite some differences moving from horticulture to vertical farming, on which I'll elaborate a bit in the next slides. Because the main difference is that the level of interaction between the plant and its growing environment, in this case a vertical farm, is much stronger because the ratio between the growing surface and your volume is relatively small compared to a greenhouse, and of course very, very small compared to open field. And so what happens is the plant is alive, the plant grows, and the plant directly influences its climate, its growing climate. And because of its transpiration, The air around the leaf, around the crop becomes more humid, and also this evaporation process creates some temperature drop. And if the exchange between the climate in the room and the climate around the crop isn't managed well, you get quite a big difference between these two. And I'll also show you a real case example later on in my slides, but it's something to keep in mind. The plant influences strongly its own growing environment, and the technology that is so important in a vertical farm actually should be focused on trying to mix those two and to create the optimal growing environment around the plant.
Okay. Thanks for that. Shall I go to the next slide?
Yes, I think that's good.
Yeah.
So another difference between horticulture and a vertical farm is that some natural factors are absent. So important factors for the transpiration process are the sun and the wind, because you need sun and wind to have energy input. But in this case, in a vertical farm, we have very efficient LED lights that actually are relatively low in heat production, for sure much lower than the sun. And the wind, it all depends completely on the design of the technical installation and on the set points and on the crop. So maybe in the next slide we can see a bit more in detail that to actually make the plant active, to make it transpire, you need energy input from outside. So either you need heat radiation from which in a normal situation would come from the sun, and that heat could deliver the energy for transpiration. Or on the other hand, you can also have wind that encourages this transpiration. Those are important things to keep in mind when designing a factory, because those are the processes that in the end will determine the plant growth. And given that they're absent in a vertical, there's no sun and wind in a vertical farm, but they are important factors for transpiration. You need to start thinking, from those actually physical and plant physiological processes when designing factories.
And the plant is really in the focus, because if it has a good environment, it will grow the best and has the best yields, etc. And so it makes sense. Sometimes we tend to look at all the technologies, but the plant itself should be the focus.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
Mariska, Lisanne, if I could just add, as a practitioner of this. I couldn't agree more with what Lisanne is saying. This is critical. In fact, we do think that if done right, this can be one of the biggest advantage of a vertical farm. And if done wrong, this can really hurt you and you will never be profitable, because again, you don't have the sun, you don't have the wind. On the other hand, you can't really control the sun and the wind in more traditional environments, but in an indoor farm, if designed properly, you can really control it, and you can control that transevaporation, and that's why you have such better control of the crops indoors in a vertical farm. So I couldn't agree with you more. This is everybody focuses on lights all the time, and everybody forgets that the real essence is exactly what Lisanne is talking about.
Good.
And to make the link again to the horticultural sector, it's true what Mike says, that actually the sun and in the horticulture, it's sometimes the sun can also cause huge stresses that now we can control, which is a big opportunity.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
If you
Talking about lights, good to mention it, Mike, a nice bridge. So what I was saying, I try to approach growing practice investigations always from the plant, and there's two important plant processes that I'm focusing on. That's the transpiration we just saw, and of course photosynthesis, because that's the motor, the engine that generates your biomass, your kilos, your money. So that's very important to try to understand the process and optimize the process. But again, here we miss the natural factors, and we need to to be aware of them, try to capture them, and with LED lights we are using, depending on the spectrum, of course, but a very small fraction of the wavelengths that actually the sun is delivering. And research is still quite developing on what this lack of other wavelengths has for effect on the crop. And like I mentioned before, the infrared, which is heat radiation, could have a positive or negative effect, but it is a big difference. But also there's a lot of discussion about the green, far red, and all the colors. Like Mike said, there's a lot of spectrum discussion, which is far from finished, but very interesting to follow.
If I may say it in my own words, you can really play with it, right? With the spectrum of the light, and because you can make a plant bigger, it can grow really exponential, but you can also concentrate the flavors, and I think it's really intriguing to know that, as you can really play with that. Do you also do that very much on purpose? I'm also curious about you, Mike. Do you have like this specific recipe that the flavor is extra tasty, or how do you do that?
Yeah, when we started our first farming practices, we actually set up 24 different zones in containers and tested different lights where we had ability to vary lights. In our production environment, we don't vary lights because we try to grow commercially, but in the R&D environment, we absolutely play with different spectrums, different production, and absolutely, we think it's a very key control point in an indoor farm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and Lisanne, you have another slide that you would like to to show us.
Yes, because I'd like to bring it to a hands-on experience, because like I was saying, I'm a researcher at Delphy, but my work is all focused on applicable research. So this is it speaks for itself, the example, what I have been discussing before. I take back this image that I was sharing at the beginning, where I state that that the plant influences a lot its own environment, and that you actually have to steer on that environment, try to optimize that environment that is directly around the plant, rather than just steering on your climate computer, which currently is happening quite often with growers in a vertical farm that have less experience with growing crops. So I want to show you a real case example that I had in my own experiment. So I had this simple setup where I put several sensors in a very small plot of basil, but the differences were already quite strong. So you see one sensor on the right, which is very much hidden inside the canopy, where there's a lot of transpiration from the crop. There's a lot of leaves around. And then there's one in the middle, which is a bit more higher up. And then there's a pointed leaf temperature sensor, which can tell me the temperature of the leaf. And so then I have those 4 factors actually: the climate that I set in my computer, the value of my macroclimate, which is the temperature in the room itself, and the temperature in the crop itself and of the crop itself. And if you show the next slide, you actually see that there are huge differences between these 4 different temperatures. Yes. And if you ignore them, you're steering on a very wrong idea, actually, because if you would steer purely on your computer, I would assume my environment is 28 degrees, my growing environment. But as you see, there's a lot of variation. Actually, the room is at 29, but the leaf itself is only at 24.6. So if you compare, it's almost 5 degrees difference. It's huge, and I just want to highlight that this thinking, starting from the plant, trying to optimize the environment around the plant, it's crucial. And this is the proof of it, that even on such a small scale and quite an easy growing environment, you already see these differences. And when you're working, which I'm doing, I'm trying to optimize growing recipes. I think it's very much important to try to optimize and steer for these values rather than coming up with the values just in the computer, let's say like that.
Okay, and do you, Mike, also work with these kind of sensors and also this detailed? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I agree completely. First, I agree that there needs to be a lot more development in it. I think it's awesome that Lisanne is wonderfully giving away all the secrets, which is great. This is very important. Look, there's 1,000 of these type of little things that have to be done right for an indoor farm to operate effectively and efficiently. Otherwise, you think you're close to optimizing something, you're very suboptimal. So the devil is always in the details, and you know, I think Lisanne is exactly right, and it's a beautiful example that you just showed.
Yeah, and what I learned from you, especially in the vertical farms, is when you make a little mistake, it's big. It can be have very big consequences. So if we go to the innovations that are needed for vertical farming, like I would like to give you the floor in that. Can you tell a little bit more about what innovations are needed in vertical farming?
Yeah, absolutely here. You know, for our belief is, again, that there's a lot of innovations that are required and be really helpful to really to drive the farms. I mean, obviously breeding genetics is critical when we're working with seeds that have been bred for outdoor environments, bred for completely different, they've been optimizing different variables. You're optimizing temperature swings and humidity and temperature in the ground and pest pressures and disease pressures and all these other things, which some of them are very relevant for indoor farming. Others are not. You're optimizing how hardy the crop will be, obviously with a much heavier wind load than we will get in the indoor farm, very different transpiration rates, as Lisanne alluded to earlier. So the point is, as the vertical farming industry grows and the market becomes bigger, more and more breeders are starting to focus on the seeds with completely different genetics that are optimized for indoor farming, where we can optimize for yield, we can optimize for nutrition, we can optimize for flavor, we can optimize for texture, we can optimize for a whole new set of variables, because we can control the temperature swings a lot better. We can control the pest pressures a lot better. So it's a completely different set of requirements. And the goal obviously is to get beyond leafy greens and again, microgreens, because it's the easiest way to start. It's the most profitable, but for this industry to really start impacting how the world eats in a broader sense, we got to get beyond it. I think the other major innovation is interdisciplinary. I think, you know, there's again tremendous innovation within lighting, within airflow, within machine learning, within sensors needs to be a lot more, as Lisanne is pointing out, but within all these different components. But it's the interdisciplinary approach and the integration of those things and making them work together that I think is going to be the next generation of innovation. And the biggest one, honestly, is food safety. It's the most simple one. I know there's a wonderful coalition of food safety, but you know, people forget in indoor farms, we create a perfect environment to grow plants, but we also create that perfect environment can grow a lot of other things. And you don't have a clean break, right? Nature is wonderful in a sense of having a winter, which kills everything and you start over. In a greenhouse, you shut down production. Usually very few greenhouses really run year round without shutting down, but you shut down, you clean, you have a crop break, you do other things. In indoor farm, you don't. In indoor farm, you run year round constantly. So if you don't design your system for sanitation, for food safety and for things like that, you are going to have a problem. It might take you a year, it might take you 2 years, but understanding food safety and sanitation, designing these systems with that in mind is frankly a huge point of difference between greenhouses and indoor farms and outdoor farms. And it's something that manufacturing executives understand very well. But a lot of greenhouse folks, I think, take it a little lightly. You're also a lot closer together. You're stacking things on top of each other. You can't get in somewhere and clean it very simply. I think that's the biggest challenge for somebody with a traditional horticulture mindset who's coming into a vertical farm. I think there's just such underappreciation of the dangers of food safety until people get hit with a recall, and this is important, right? We put food in our bodies. That's, I think, frankly, the biggest risk to the industry, because a lot of the pioneers, you know, who want to change the world just don't have the experience. And again, that's why I'm such a big supporter of the coalition that has been formed to drive food safety. In my mind, food safety is something that indoor farms, greenhouse, and others should never compete against one another in. You know, I'm willing to give away my food safety protocols to anybody who wants to enter the business, because I think, you know, if anybody has an issue, we all have an issue. Automation is critical. Again, if you can't reduce labor costs, there's so much there. There's a lot of silly automation, and in many ways, over automated or under automated, because the thought is, hey, it's good enough. We can build it for so many euros per meter squared in capital costs, and that's good enough. And, you know, you're being too fancy. And the truth is always in the middle. It's not over automating, but it's not under automating. So I think there's a lot of real disruption to happen there. And finally, again, getting artificial intelligence and machine learning from buzzwords to meaningful facilitation to get to autonomous growing is a huge thing that, frankly, with respect to most, I think, honestly, only a few companies really understand and are doing well. And I think more will, but I think if people don't figure it out, they're going to have a really tough time competing through.
Yeah, exactly, because it's a very complex and very, like you said, the interdisciplinary tasks. Well, you must know quite a lot, and you can leave it to a computer, but there's also some human logic that you have to put in it, etc. So it's either you're diving into it or you will not comprehend it.
Yeah, the rate of change will be so significant that if you miss it, you won't be able to catch up in a meaningful way. And that's the issue.
Okay, so important.
So maybe just going back to the next slide, kind of the last point is the whole concept of an interdisciplinary sport, right? This is something that on one hand is so logical and clean. On the other hand, there's so much innovation that is still required that, you know, all of us are obviously very well-meaning people, and we're all trying hard and we're dedicating our lives to trying to create something wonderful for the world, more sustainable way of farming, cleaner, better, involve the communities. But there's so much to do that we really believe that a collaborative approach is key. And that's something that, again, I think the indoor farm industry has to learn from the horticulture industry, in particular the Dutch horticulture industry, because if you look at, there's always secrets between greenhouses, and they're always competing on different things, and you know, every grower has his or her way of doing things. But generally, the collaboration between the greenhouses in Holland is, I think, quite inspirational, and something that we in indoor farming need to aspire to and figure out, where do we compete and where do we help each other so the whole industry advances and learns. And I thought
you really
critical. Yeah, and that's why we created Infinite Acres. We thought it was important to lead by example, not just with cheap words. Words don't mean anything. We wanted to put action, we wanted to put our money, we wanted to put our intellectual property, we wanted to put everything at stake. And look, it's hard. Collaborations are hard. Everybody's got egos. Everybody's really good at something. So you have to give something up, right? You have to check your ego. It's very hard. But if you do it right, I think you can accelerate growth, and I think the industry needs it. So I think that's the biggest innovation that is required. It's the mindset change.
Well, thank you for that. So if we look at the next question, actually, how vertical farms differ from greenhouses, you already touched it a little bit. But yes, Lisanne, please tell me about your vision regarding that.
Yeah, I'd also like to link a bit to the words that Mike was saying regarding the innovations, because I heard something very interesting that he was saying about the AI and the machine learning, that it's so crucial in this industry. And again, I want to share my view from the plant perspective. What I think is very crucial at this stage is that you're actually measuring the right thing, because I mean, there's so many sensors out there, and if you just put your factory full of sensors, but not being able to link the parameter that you're measuring to actually the growth process or how well the plant is doing, then you miss a crucial step. And I think there again, also the interdisciplinary approach is important. You need to have that link between a grower, between someone who understands the plant's functioning and someone who can do AI and machine learning, which is a difficult link. But if you can get that thing right, it's crucial. And also, therefore, you need the right sensors, because also a lot of vertical farms are still using horticultural sensors. I mean, they do the job, but I think there lies quite a nice opportunity for new innovations and new development to develop sensors that can actually measure on a small scale this microclimate that I was talking about, but also tell us more about the plant itself. How is it functioning? How is photosynthesis going? How's transpiration going? If we can actually quantify those things remotely, that would be a huge opportunity.
Great. So you really have more need and more specific needs in vertical farming than, well, just the greenhouse, to put it like that. So that makes a step to the difference between greenhouses and vertical farms. Can you well give your vision on that, Lisanne, as you were?
Yeah. So I actually already mentioned quickly, but what is happening in a vertical farm is that, especially with the leafy greens, your time frame is much shorter. So instead of growing a crop for a full year in a greenhouse, you're doing a month or so. But that makes that also your problem solving, for example, needs to be much quicker. If you have an issue with your crop, you need to immediately respond, because you don't have that buffer of time to actually recuperate some damage that is done. So it requires quick response. And on the other end, it also requires, again, from the technical side, more flexibility. Some systems are not flexible to really, maybe on an hourly scale or a daily scale, change the growing situation. And they're more used to weeks or months. But we need to reduce that time frame also in technical installations to give the plant the optimal growing environment. So that's a difference. And then another huge difference and opportunity, I think, is that plant growth recipes, so growing optimally, can actually be used on a global scale. And I want to highlight that I have the point of view that each vertical farm is unique, each technical installation is unique, and the interaction between the plant and the design of the factory in the end will determine your yield. So I cannot say, okay, if I put this growing recipe in this farm, I'll get X kilos per square meter per year. It will be the same in the other one. That's not the case. But on the other hand, if you're able to control that microclimate that I've been talking about and optimize that, you can actually multiply it unlimited. Infinite.
Do you have the same experience, Mike, as you have different facilities, of course? Is it easy to have like the same approach and the same results, or does it differ?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great point. You know, when we started with different facilities, different sizes, all relatively small, testing different things. And what we have gotten to after 5 or 6 years, what we'll call reference design, which is a very standardized modular design where everything is repeatable and duplicated. And yes, we can now have the exact same conditions everywhere because of the design. But it took us a long time to get there, and we still, again, in the R&D world, try to test different things. But the goal is, if we really want to do it commercially, is to have this completely standardized reference modular design. Otherwise, look, the big difference is we're offering consistency and repeatability. And again, you know, we don't view what we're doing. Our goal is not to just sell lettuce, right? We keep talking about nutrition. And if you can't have that consistency and repeatability, if you can't run it like a manufacturing facility, then honestly, it's going to be really hard to be much better than a greenhouse, because it is for a while a little more expensive to build. So if you can't sell a different product, if you can't drive differentiation, if you cannot decommoditize what you're doing, vertical farming shouldn't be done. That's why, again, it's not a hobby, right? You either do it professionally and you do it right, and you come up with a completely different product. And for that, you have to approach it very differently. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, and if you look, well, when we started the interview, you were also referring to that in Africa, it's more difficult to, or maybe not more difficult, but it's different to grow there. Do you see in future it's possible to have like this same results also in different climates and as well, and in different time zones? Let me put it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, what I was referring to is different energy costs, different labor costs, different skill
Yeah,
sets,
of course. Yes.
of spare parts. So I think a system has to, again, be designed wisely so you can modify it for the culture and, you know, the right conditions in each location you're going to. But again, the difference between a greenhouse is you're coming in and you're essentially totally adapting to whatever the environment is, the ability of growers and everything else. With an indoor farm, you're coming in and you are very clearly, look, we're growing in a module and our module is insulated, and I can be in Timbuktu or Nigeria or Norway or wherever, and we're going to set the same recipe the same way, and we're going to grow the exact identical crops. And it could be raining or shining, there could be a lot of sun or no sun. And you know, the whole point is to simplify. I don't want to say to dumb down ability of it, but it is, once you figure it out, it is much simpler to run an indoor farm than a greenhouse. It is much more scalable. And that is, in fact, the benefit of global scalability of indoor farms versus greenhouses. Well, absolutely.
That makes sense. And so then I come to my next question, how vertical farming as a food production system can contribute to the worldwide food production, to healthy food. How do you look at that, Lisanne?
Yeah, I see huge opportunities to supply fresh, nutritious food and in urbanized regions, especially given that there's still so much innovation happening. Vertical farms become more and more efficient, and we really can reduce food miles in a way. And what Mike was mentioning about food safety, I think both those aspects have great potential to provide healthy, fresh vegetables in an urban environment.
So, and Mike, do you have something to add on that?
No, I think it's about freshness. It's about pesticide free and being clean. It's about growing in the most sustainable way possible.
Yeah.
And it's about nutrition. It's all about nutrition. And it's about being able to control the crop, get that science down to a very pragmatic capability so you can do it everywhere, regardless of the scarce resources, capabilities, and a variety of other things of each particular region. And once you figure it out once, to be able to duplicate it everywhere and scale it. To me, that's the game. And if you can do it, then vertical farming makes tremendous sense and it's going to have a huge impact on the world. And I believe that there's absolutely no reason that it cannot be done. In fact, I believe we've proven that we are doing it.
Well, on the 9th of June, we had this webinar on vertical farming and also how vertical farms all over the world well, survived or changed their business model due to COVID-19. And it really was, for me, it was very interesting to see how adaptive vertical farming growers are and how important they were during the COVID, especially with the lockdowns, and how easy they could deliver. Can you, are you agreeing on that, Mike, or how did you cope with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the big problems was that supply chains have been so, you know, we keep talking about how great the food supply chains are, but a disruption shows you the issues, right? So you had fruits and vegetables rotting in farms and you had stores that had no product. Why?
Yeah.
Well, because the supply chains are very specialized. The food service supply chain only delivers to restaurants, and a retail supply chain gets to retailers, and there's no mingling. And folks try to become creative and do it, but with an indoor farm, you bypass all of that nonsense, all of those touch points, all of the waste that is created, and you're next to your customers. So if you're growing and you can't sell to food service, you can sell to retail. So yeah, so we totally pivoted. We created a new business unit. Our D2C, direct to consumer business unit, was created, and it's phenomenal. We reconnected with a consumer base.
Yeah.
And folks started coming to our farm to buy products.
Yeah.
We strengthened relationships with retailers because we were there for them. We strengthened relationships with the chefs because as they were struggling to come up with stuff, we could really work with them, and we can sell some of the other stuff they could do for them and help them when they couldn't sell in the restaurants, so they could cook up some meals or whatever else, and we could move it. We partnered up with hospitals. It created a whole opportunity. And again, being small startups, you can pivot on a dime, right? So you can do whatever you need to. So we pivoted and we strengthened relationships. I think, you know, COVID is obviously a horrible, horrible thing. There's a lot of pain all over the place. And, you know, I would never wish for anything like that to anybody. But, you know, the beauty of small businesses is every threat is an opportunity. So we pivoted and we created a whole bunch of opportunities. And we're going to come out of COVID a lot stronger than we went in.
So good to hear. So good to hear. And Lisanne, did it have quite an effect on your research, or?
Yeah, so it was interesting to see actually, because actually it didn't, and so in a way I have a bit of a different story than most people in the COVID times, but that's also the beauty of the story behind vertical farming, because working in the food production industry, it was regarded as a vital job, so I kept on going regularly to my job, but what was beautiful to see is that production just could keep on going. And food was kept being produced because actually it's a very low labor intensive way of producing. And even though what Mike was saying, you saw empty supermarkets and supply chains were broken, but still the supply kept on functioning normally, while around us each market almost got heavily affected. And that aspect was, I mean, very interesting as such to see, okay, while all the markets around us are really disrupted, we can just keep on going, we can keep on producing. That also shines a light on what's possible in the future in case similar situations would happen again and we have more widely spread vertical farming supply from our vegetables and fruits. Then this is a huge opportunity in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we also see that a lot of countries are taking next steps to invest in all kinds of food production systems to make sure that they can feed their own population. And we especially with GreenTech and with the Dutch horticulture technology companies, we see that demand is really increasing. And as GreenTech, I'm going to wrap it up a little bit, as you can sense right now, is we of course struggled as GreenTech itself, as we couldn't have a show in June. But despite that, we postponed it to October. But despite that, we are still in contact with a lot of the growers and with a lot of the technology companies, and you see that the demand is increasing tremendously. So that also gives us the opportunity to reach out in October, from 20 to 22 October in Amsterdam, to indeed start with the first physical horticulture show again. Maybe it's just a few people, maybe it's the predicted 3,500 people that we estimated that should be able to come, mainly from Europe. But we will reach out, of course, in the meantime and during those few days also to the Americas and to Asia. And we will do it with a Follow the Sun program that is fully online. I very much would like to thank you, first of all, for your contribution to this great interview. I'm sure that everybody learns from it because it's very much in depth. You even showed some secrets, revealed some secrets, as Mike said, Lisanne. So thank you for that. And I wholeheartedly hope that I can see you in person in October. And if not, then definitely we will see each other virtually. So thank you very, very much, and stay safe and sound, of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Mariska.
Okay.
And Mike too for the nice conversation.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful seeing you. Bye-bye.
Bye.